Welcome back, everyone, to the Gather Poets podcast. I have a special poet that many of you are familiar with and likely love their work. Welcome, Carlos. You have some wonderful green glasses on today, and you're bringing the energy. How are you feeling? And do you want to give us a word or two on maybe just how you found poetry or how poetry found you and who you are?
Thank you, Maria. I'm so excited to be here. I've been thinking about chatting with you for a couple of weeks now, and I must admit that this is a special occasion. I am really happy to be here. I've seen all the podcasts with my fellow poets, with my fellow gather poets, and I've been so yearnful about sitting here with you. This is a beautiful intention again. Um, and yeah, I'm sporting the green glasses for luck, right? Mm. The question was, can I set us off with a little comment about my creative process?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. My name is Carlos, right? Hello, everyone.
Mhm.
I am a poet. I was born and raised in Mexico, so this is like my first time speaking or detailing the ways of my writing and creative endeavor. Um, I'm not quite sure I will be able to arrive to conclusions or a very overarching explanation of how do I work because it is and will always remain, hopefully, a mystery to me. It
Mm,
is mysterious, right? It is mysterious. The truest answer to it is I'm not quite sure how I do it. It
mm,
just excites me.
mm,
Every time is different. Every poem, it's its own kind of challenge, its own kind of adventure, right? Um, they carry, I don't know, the cause of their becoming the very thing that excites me, that provokes me to it, forms it, right?
mm,
So I don't know. We could begin by presenting this little game that is present in conversations between creatives. You should know it. Is this distinction between ox creatives and cat creatives? Have you heard about it?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a dichotomy, right? There's no such thing as two kinds of creative, two kinds of poet. But I do think that if I had to choose, identify more with the cat. You know, I
Mm,
am spontaneous in my writing. I am reactive in my poetry.
mm,
I try to be open like that as a way of preparing, of willing myself into not an ideal, but in a good enough state to receive inspiration. In the
mm,
words of this great poem that I think we all know, David White,
mm,
alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity, right?
mm, mm.
And it's such a powerful. It is even like a mantra if you let it be one. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Um, if you are alert as a cat, right?
Mhm.
Poetry might as well happen to you. That's what I think.
Wow.
That's an overview of my process. What do you
Wow.
think?
It reminds me of everything that you've said reminds me of a quote by Lucille Clifton, the great Lucille. And she says, poetry comes not from knowing, but from wonder and from wondering. And I think that encapsulates the idea of poetry being of mystery and of sort of reaction. And it's hard to teach that without alertness. And perhaps it's less of a learning to write great poetry, but more of a capturing, right? Like a capturing of the wonder and the mystery in the moment.
Yeah.
Um, Because I think it can slip from your fingers, and so maybe the poet's job is essentially to keep it in your fingers a little bit longer than one might be able to without being alert. Um, you can notice, like, you notice the world, you notice things in the world when you're looking, and I know that sounds maybe rudimentary, but I think it's the truth, and it's the truth for poetry as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you're right.
yeah, what do you think about that?
Oh no, you're definitely onto something. The world and our subjective experience of it is such a wondrous place, right?
Mhm,
And the idea of being able to catch a glimpse of it, to tap into its mystery,
mhm,
it's a important thing, I guess. Um, Truth be told, I think that poets in general, at least I do, experience poetry not only as a project or as a platform for this very intention, but as a kind of appetite, a heightened appetite that we all have, I think,
mm,
uh, for admiration,
mm,
for a quiet contemplation of what beseeches us, right?
mm,
We are all, I think, in some way or another, stunned by the reality of our experience in awe or in woe, right?
mhm,
Life can be terrible and challenging and demanding.
mhm,
And even then, I think that poetry can make something like for us. Poetry can help us like go through it. Don't you think?
mhm.
Mhm,
Yeah, it reminds me of when we had our wonderful conversation in Mexico City.
mhm,
So Carlos and I met earlier this year. Was it in March or April or May? I can't remember. One of those months. Um,
You may, I
and
think.
we had the wonderful chance to have an evening with our other poet friend Isabel, and it was truly phenomenal. But one thing he said to me, Carlos, I don't think I'll ever forget. We were having a conversation about what it means to tolerate uncertainty, and in the context of doing risky and scary things in life. So I think I was telling the story of how I quit my accounting job, and with that came a lot of uncertainty in my life. And I remember asking the question, and it was a very naive question at the time, but I asked, from a psychological standpoint, would it make sense to learn how to tolerate uncertainty to get through those times? And I remember you told me it is not our duty to learn to tolerate these things, but rather to find community to lighten the load. And that was very profound. And I remember that it changed me.
Mhm,
The idea that these things are not meant to be eaten and groveled under, but rather to be carried, perhaps, and carried with other people. And I think maybe what you're getting at is poetry in a way can also do that for us. It's not necessarily fixing things. It's not necessarily helping us tolerate these hard things, but rather it's carrying the hard thing for us for the time being. And in that way, it's almost like a vehicle for us. If we're climbing up a mountain, it's the donkey that's carrying our rice and potatoes for us, for lack of
right.
a more complex metaphor. But yeah, I think that what you're getting at there is so important because I think poetry is healing, but I don't think it's necessarily healing in the way that when one says poetry is healing, it sounds like it is because I have used poetry to go through a lot of hard times in my life, but I don't necessarily think that it really solved anything. It
Mhm.
just lightened my load in the moment. So in a way, perhaps it did solve something. But
Yeah.
yeah. What do you think about that? I'm just gonna keep asking
First,
that by the way. What do you
yeah,
think?
please, please, let's do this. First of all, shout out to Isabel. I hope she's watching us, and missing the opportunity to chat again because it was beautiful. It was a beautiful occasion. Um, oh, you said a lot of important ideas. Um, Uncertainty. Yeah, well, I do think that poetry as a way of being, as an ethic, right? Not only as a craft, uh, as a technique, or even as a literary form, but as a way of being, stands contrary and even revolutionary, right? Against other modes, other modalities of being that ask of us the very contrary thing, right?
Mm,
To know there is a pretense of knowledge in our daily lives, right? In our sciences, in our frameworks. Um, and I don't think that we suffer for it. It complicates things to ask ourselves and to ask each other to know how to live. I do think, and this might be controversial, but I do think that we don't need to know how to live as much as we don't need to know how to write poetry, to write it, right? Or
mm,
to enjoy it, or to enjoy anything, right? Or to love. The ethics of certainty, right, in this regard are incomplete, are um in a way, I don't know, antithetic to our way of existing in the world. There's so much we don't know, and I think there's so much we don't need to know. So yeah, when we change our mentality, our way of approaching this very fact to that of sharing it, right?
mm,
Not only to stop and try to um like decipher the mystery, but to bathe in it, right?
mm,
To share it because we are all in the same position. I do
mm,
think, speaking in terms of how we could use poetry to survive hard times or how it helps us, because it does. I do
mm,
think that humans, we don't change when we know that we need to change, or even when we have the tools that we need to incite that change upon us. But
mhm,
when we feel sufficiently supported, when we
mm,
feel sufficiently recognized as worthy of that change, when we manage to feel a little bit less lonely, because it is scary to change, it is scary to get better. Don't won't you say, right? It's challenging, but when we can do it together, right? Socially, in a community, in a communal way, it gets easier. And poetry, I think, insofar it provokes the experience of the other, right? You
mm,
meet the other through poetry, its singularity, its difference.
mm,
You suddenly realize that the other is as alive as you are. It is as unprecedented as you are, right? It is having, I don't know, there's poems that that you read them and you say, oh, he's having a hard time, right? She's
mm,
having an exciting one, as
mhm,
much as I am, and that might save us. I think that might save us. Mhm,
mm.
mhm,
I'm thinking about what you said. There's so much we don't need to know. And it takes me right back to that Lucille Clifton quote, like, "Poetry comes not from knowing, but from wonder." And lately, I've been thinking a lot about what it means to write from the body versus, like, the mind, and write from not an intellectual place, but actually to feel, like, somatically like my poem is sort of manifesting itself from my body, and
Mhm.
It's like it's very new to me, and I'm just playing with it and seeing what it feels like. But it feels like almost there's this awakening that's happening in my body, and I think at some point it's going to connect where potentially the intellectual and the somatic are going to meet somewhere and kiss and get married or something, and it's going to be wonderful. And maybe that's when I'll like write a New York Times bestseller or something. Who knows? Um,
Hopefully.
but sometimes I see myself outside of my poetry journey. Like I can almost like look at where I am, and it's very encouraging to see and feel that this is all going to happen for the rest of my life, and where I'm at right now is just one little like blip on the map, and then, 30, 40 years I'm still going to be writing and creating and sharing poetry. And in a way, I think that's also a connection because I'm connecting. I can see my future self and my past self, and I'm like having communion with myself. And so, to anyone that's listening that's feeling like I don't have a poetry community or I don't have people to share my poetry with yet, by the way, you can always just message me or Carlos. We will be your community, please. I really mean it.
Definitely.
Um, but I do think sometimes there can be a sense of communion even if you write in isolation and no one knows that you write poetry, and that might be your season, and you can still commune with your future self and your past self and other versions of you, and there can be richness in that. So in a way, maybe the argument we are making here is that poetry is perhaps never singular in a way, or it's never something that's done in isolation,
Exactly.
because at its core, I think it is meant to connect and do that work of supporting that you were talking about, that I think is just so phenomenal. I'm curious, Carlos, if you have noticed in your practice, without obviously revealing any confidential details about your clients, um, this idea of not having to know something and being okay, and instead of knowing, sharing in the mystery. Have you seen that change people's life? Like, what has been the effect of that sort of practice or mindset?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Again, the idea that we are able to achieve certainty puts us in a very compromising position. Um, I've seen people, and in a way, I think that most of the therapeutic intention stems from um, that very conflict, right?
Mm,
We see, and moreover, in this time and age where we are uh, constantly consuming incomplete profiles, right, in social media, where we are able to project an image of ourselves that, although incomplete, serves as a conduit of conduit of the ideal, right? We all tweak our image in those places. So in most of the therapeutic processes that I've been lucky to follow, there's a sense of how did the other achieve it? That question is ever present. How did the other manage to live like that? How did he crack it? Right. I
mhm,
want that. He looks as if he knows how to live, how to love, how to be loved, how to work. You know, it looks as if she cracked the formula for making money,
mm,
cracked the formula for living through her hobby. Right? It
mhm,
looks as if the other knows. It always looks as if the other knows. That's a constitutive truth of our psyche, right? It is an illusion, but a needed one. And so much of the therapeutic process, in my opinion, is to try and carry the weight of realizing that nobody knows how to live, not even your parents, right? There's not the adult with a capital A, that being that we envisioned we were when we were children, right? The one that solved the formula for living. So I think you might change your life if you start thinking that this is not a singular curse that you have. You know, you are not uniquely cursed with being clumsy about life, you know, with not knowing, with uncertainty. We all have it, you know, and we are all living in spite of it. Nobody knows, and still everybody lives, right? Everybody keeps on living, keeps on trying things without that knowledge. And it is a very sophisticated process. I don't know, it's complicated. You cannot standardize it. You cannot create, at least I don't think there's a way of making a protocol for, you know, like breaking out of that illusion. Again, it is about alertness. If you're willing to witness the other, if you are willing to look carefully and intentionally into your sister's life, into your father's, right? Something's gonna become apparent about how he manages without such a knowledge, without the
Mm,
knowledge you crave. So yeah. And I think that poetry, because I don't know, like, I want to ask you a question, Maria.
sure.
Have you ever felt, considering all this, have you ever felt that a poet that you admire inspires you towards keeping, you know, it on, right? Towards still try,
Mm,
even after their death, right? Like poets from 100 years ago or that
mm.
just recently died, they keep on managing that very content, don't they? Have you ever like felt something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the biggest indication that somebody is inspiring me is that I feel a deep pull within me
Mm,
to go do the thing that they are doing. So when I read a really great poem, I know that it's a great poem if I want to go write a great poem after I read that poem. But I like the idea of inspiration. I think it's the Greek word inspirare. It means to take breath in or to be injected with breath. And I love the idea that even after death, the inspiration is actually the thing that is no longer present when the person dies. And it's so
mhm,
like they've almost passed on their own breath through inspiration. Um, I love that idea. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the absolute beauty and maybe even the joy
mhm,
of living in uncertainty is the idea
mhm,
that you see someone else and you're witnessing someone else even beyond their life here on earth, um, how they have managed to withhold uncertainty, and
mhm.
it makes you try one more time.
Exactly.
Right? And then you just keep trying
Exactly.
and trying, and maybe life is just trying.
It is a long try that is hopefully worth it, right? You
Yeah.
just touched something pretty interesting because, yeah, and in the words of Louis Gluck, that you know I admire,
Mhm.
mm, poetry lends us a power, a very particular power around the event, right?
Mm.
We get to say something about it. We get to say something about circumstance, about how unforeseeable sometimes some things are, such as
Mhm.
death, right? Such as conflict, mm, such as the world. We get to say something about it, and that takes authority from the event. You reclaim it, and poets, I think, they excel at something like that, at that very practice. But we all need to do it in a way. When something woeful, something terrible happens, even when something exciting and beautiful and you know desirable happens to us, we get to say something about it, as if to integrate it, as if to position ourselves around it in a way that better suits us, right? Yes, I don't know, my best friend died, but I will create an oath, an eulogy, right?
Mhm.
Something beautiful should come out of it.
Mhm.
A flower, right?
Mhm.
And it is not only in the flowers, like Lavatut said. That's another creative, another author that I admire and that inspires me. It is everywhere.
Mhm.
There's always something happening, and we get to write something about it.
Mhm.
And that's just so exciting to me. You know, a couple of minutes ago, you said that you sometimes imagine yourself as an older person, right? 30 years into the future, that you imagine yourself writing still that beautiful image. Then just all the poems you're gonna write, all the poems you're gonna read, and you're breaking it. You're making such a beautiful place for other people to thrive in poetry. To I don't know. You're so inspiring, Maria. I think you should know that.
Oh.
I think you should hear it as often as we could say. Um, we need that kind of space. We need that kind of opportunity right now, more than ever. I think because of the world that we're living in.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Carlos. You
Yeah,
make me teary-eyed. That's very kind. I feel the same with about you, by the way, and I feel that I like to believe that um, most things in life arrive at your doorstep, um, and it's kind of your job to unwrap them. And again, it's like being alert for those things that are arriving on your doorstep. And I feel that our friendship is one of those, and so I feel very lucky that we got to meet. The first time we read your poem, when we published your poem in Gather,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you mentioned Louise in your poem, and I knew which Louise you were talking about, and it felt right. It felt everything. I don't know. It just was one of those moments that I was in wonder. I was in awe when I read that poem, and then we connected with you online and met you in person. And I just know that these sorts of things are not everyday things; that they're meant to be stared at with wonder. So just thank you
Exactly.
for coming into my life and the rest of the poetry community's life as well. Like, you're such an inspiration, even just in the way that you articulate your being. I think you're there and you're listening, but also at the same time, like, just like, even if you're not saying anything to anyone, your presence is felt. And I think that's really, really special. Um, Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, Maria. Oh yeah, yes, it is a privilege to be able to share this with you all. These 12 weeks, this past season with Gather was a life changing experience. It
Mhm.
was for me to count on it every Sunday, right? Every Sunday
Yes.
morning. Was truly special. Was truly special.
Mm,
And I don't know, yeah, Gather was like you guys publishing shoot the poem
mhm,
um, was actually my first time being published, right, in a digital or printed magazine, and I don't know, it confirmed something not even about myself as a writer and as a poet, but as a person, you know. In a way, it reaffirmed that I should try,
mhm,
and that's very special. That's something, it's healing, you know. It is
mhm.
hard to try,
It is.
but sometimes, as you said, sometimes it happens to be worth it, you know.
Mm,
I'm already seeking to participate in every submission call that I find. I'm very eager to the next time that I get to be shared, you know,
mhm,
again. I hope that soon, but I'm not worrying. I'm not
mhm.
in desperation, you know. It will come whenever it needs to come.
Yeah.
I'll be open to that. I'll be alert.
Yeah, you'll be alert.
Yeah.
Um, I'm so happy, Carlos, because I think the more people that get to read your poetry, the better. I'm just so excited just to have other people read your work. Truly, you have a gift. And I think part of your poetry is exactly embodying what your philosophy is about being alert and about holding those spaces in this world where the uncertainty lives and we're not quite sure. And I love that you often write to Louise. And we've been kind of mentioning her on and off in this conversation, but I'd love to hear the story behind how you fell in love with Louise or how she fell in love with you and how your spirits connected. Was it very early on when you like before you started writing, or has it been like a recent sort of love affair? Tell me.
Oh well. What an interesting question, Maria. Thank you. Uh, I actually started reading her maybe 3 years ago, or even like
Mhm,
tops, and she was still alive, right?
mhm,
Hmm. I had a copy of Averno. I don't know how I came to it, but it was there.
mhm,
Uh, and there was something in her voice, in her creative voice, right? Because I only had the opportunity to listen to her after months of being in fascination about her poetry. I really remember the first time that I looked for her in YouTube, you know, and saw her gray hair and her crackling voice, the solemnity of it.
mhm,
I just wish we could have had a lot of, I don't know, more time with her. You know, there's a couple of readings in YouTube. There's a couple of um, conversations between her and other people, and every single one of them I have downloaded. Every single them I have like as a kind of totem, right? When I need reassurance, I seek her. There's something in the image of the, I don't know, a curated life, right?
mhm,
In a interview, she even she even says that she still, back then, right, in 2014, I think, she that even then she still didn't know, right?
mhm,
When I heard that, right, when I heard that that was like uh she won the Nobel Prize, right, for
mhm,
literature, and countless awards. Mm, that even her didn't know, right?
mhm,
That she only hoped for another poem, that she prayed for another poem, right?
Wow.
There was a reality in her presence that stuck,
Mhm.
even after her death. The day she died, I was like on my couch, looking towards the street, and there's a beautiful mosquito tree outside of it. And I remember vividly that I was looking at the news, and that heard from I heard for what that I heard about her passing, right?
Mhm.
And I just had to close my phone, leave it aside, and I remember that a little yellowish um butterfly, right, arrived into one of the mesquite's branches, and she stayed there like for a couple of seconds, and I was like sad at that, but at the same time I was like, that very idea, like the very image of the little creature that eats full with water, and the great mosquito tree that survives the harshest droughts, right? The contrast of it moved me, right? And after a couple of seconds, the butterfly just floated away. She
Mhm.
just fled away. And I thought that was Lucy's look, right?
Wow.
And since then, yeah, since then, she stays as one of my. I feel a kingship, right? Not only in style, but um, I don't know, as a person, I still feel
Mhm.
it. I feel it more than ever, like more than ever. And she's the wild iris. She gets to live like forever.
Mhm.
She gets to be reborn every single time I find a poem of hers that inspires me, and I find that beautiful. I do hope that my poetry, I don't know, maybe someday someone is gonna find something in what I'm writing, something as their own, right? Something
Mhm.
as theirs, as I found in Luis Luis's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One can only hope that one's poetry outlives ourselves. Like, I remember hearing a long time ago that I think it's like 4 generations. It takes 4 generations until, your great, 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 great grandchildren won't know your name. And, it's you're gone in pretty much 4 generations. Maybe it's 5, I can't remember exactly. But the thought of that to me was so wild that it doesn't matter even in a digital world when we have all of these tools, ancestry.com. We don't we can't name most people can't name their fourth removed great grandparent, right? So the thought that somehow, some way, through poetry, through writing, we can cheat death, we can outlive our ultimate demise, which is to rot in the ground and have no one remember us 4 generations from now, is, I think, hopeful, and that it's
Mm.
us trying to be immortal or live a bit longer. But that said, I did read something the other day, a Substack article, and they were talking about how likely 200 years from now, 300 years from now, we the great writers of our time will still not be remembered. So I think in some way,
Mm.
again, all we're doing is trying, right? And we hope that it's worth it. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't, but there's no alternative, I think. The alternative to not trying is to wither away, to die. Um,
Oh,
maybe that's a
what a
hot
beautiful. Yeah, what a beautiful idea. And I would like um to challenge a very popular notion of what poetry achieves. I've read several times, right, in several essays. I heard this argument before. I know you have as well. But it is said that poetry helps us to transcend, right? To be in touch with the divine in us, in a way, even to defeat death, right? And um, the vacuum. But I think that we, not only poets, but humans, we long for reintegration, right?
Mm,
Um, I think that the very fact that there's a lot of poetry that focuses on nature, right, on our lack of it, uh, means that it is more than transcendence, immanence, right?
mm,
It is like a way of saying how much we miss to feel the oneness that we once felt with the world, right?
mm,
Like it is as if we're chanting how we remember, how we are reminded of that bond that we have with everything.
mm,
There's I don't know, there's poems that I've read that make me feel that very thing, you know. It is as if I could say that that poem, that poet touched something or was touched by that something.
mhm,
And in that way, I think that we should use poems, we should approach poems as conduits, right? As ways of being close to that state again. There's something even micellar, like mushrooms do, right? Something connecting in poems. Um, and it's beautiful. It is beautiful, don't you think? To feel that close to everything again when
yeah.
it happens.
I love the word you keep saying, which is again,
Hmm.
which is to say it's not the first time, right?
Exactly.
This is not unique to a new experience. I'm curious what you think about the quote by Robert Frost, which is, oh, I'm gonna mess this one up, but it's something along the lines of, "I've never written a poem I didn't discover,"
Mm.
and essentially the idea that every poem is a new discovery. But perhaps what I'm hearing is maybe to you, a poem is not a discovery of something new, but a return to something already there? Or how does that feel for you?
Mm. You could go both ways, right? Mm. Life and poetry has the right to be contradictory. I
Mm,
think so. And I would defend the idea that every poem is a new one. And
mm,
at the same time, I would argue that there's nothing to be said that
exac
hasn't been said before, right? Um, and I found both possibilities beautiful.
yeah,
I really do. Um, I really think that we should not be afraid of being inspired like that, right?
yeah,
We shouldn't be afraid of resemblance. There's this saying like that. Great art is still, you know.
yeah.
But I don't think that it is stealing because I don't think you can claim ownership, right?
Mm.
I don't think that there's something as to being original under the sun. And at the same time, every single draft that we've made and that we're going to make, it is undeniably unprecedented, right? We
Mhm.
reinvent language in poetry. We stretch it. We expand it. We create words, right? Sometimes in poetry, there's poems that are very unique in that regard. Um, so I just think that it shouldn't stop us. The problem of being authentic. It
Mhm.
shouldn't stop us to try, and because you are unmistakably and unavoidably original,
Mhm.
and you cannot help it. You cannot help it, even when you steal, right? Even when you copy. That's
Mhm.
the first time you've done it. So yeah.
I love that.
How about that?
Oh, I have shivers just thinking about that because, like, really, when you think about it, that's the human existence is I am an individual and I live my life like this is my unique own experience. I am the first person of me to ever have lived, but I am experiencing the exact same life that so many people have before me. And
Exactly.
the great stories of our time, the great novels of our time. We have these meta stories that we cling to. The story of the the two people who are not supposed to fall in love and they love each other so much they have to and they cause their own destruction. There's like a million and a half novels out there with that exact same story, but yet each
Hmm.
one is its own story. It's I think we have these like meta truths and meta existences, but then we in ourselves we experience them very uniquely and
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it's for me it feels both comforting to know that I'm not unique at all and that my poetry probably like, sounds like a lot of other people's poetry. But then at the same time, knowing that, wow, like this came from me and no one else, and each word that I've put onto the page, no one has ever combined these words. Which when you
Exactly.
think about it, we have 26 characters in the English language. It's the combination of those characters into words, into stanzas, into line breaks, into white space, like,
Hmm.
I mean, obviously infinite combinations, but also my mind can't imagine that. My mind can only imagine that, "Holy shit, no one has done this before." Like, no one
Hmm.
has that even a title, that's wild to me. Sometimes there are unique titles. I think if people can find a unique title for a poem, that's actually a very huge accomplishment because like, you're just gonna have the same title as another poem, and that's, like there's nothing wrong with that, but yeah,
Unavoidable.
it is unavoidable, you're right, and I think it's actually really good advice there perhaps to someone who is starting to have a love for poetry bubble up within them to not be afraid to imitate the greats, to imitate the people that you love because, yes, we are living in a place where things are mirrored, but at the same time, if you're trying to write like Emily Dickinson, well, Emily Dickinson never wrote in the voice of someone trying to be like Emily Dickinson. So
Uh-huh.
actually, maybe your voice is the voice of someone trying to be like Emily Dickinson, which
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
different ways to think about it for sure. But
Yeah. 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 It is the human song, and it started a long time ago, right? And we get to be our own singular note that is never gonna be played again.
mhm,
And I think that that's some beautiful music cutting through the void, right?
mhm,
Um, yeah, that the fact of how limited we are in language shouldn't deter us
mhm,
from from trying to to know the limits of it, right?
yeah.
Um, I don't have a technical formation in poetry. There's poets that I admire, like Ben Lerner, who it is not he is not only a poet but a critic. And there's analysis that he puts forward about other people's poems that I don't know um, that touch the subject of meter, right, of structure, of
Mhm,
tonality, and all of that is so foreign to me, you know, and it lets me feeling so small and so childlike because I'm not acquainted, with this, with the with the process like that.
mhm,
But I still enjoy it,
mhm.
and it justifies my life more often than not.
Yeah.
Poetry. Yeah, I as much as lose, I'm always hoping for the next poem.
Mm,
I'm If I'm not writing, I'm thinking about why I'm not writing. You're right. And what can I do to start writing again?
mm,
And I love my life. I love that it is like that. I don't feel that I could ever get tired of it. Right.
mhm. I think
And yeah,
sorry, go ahead, Carlos.
yeah. That's the whole of the idea.
Um, I was just gonna say that I don't think one could ever be bored if one is alert. And so perhaps the way of being that you're describing, which I love and I want to take that with me and soak it all in. Um, the idea that to just be on alert, anticipating the arrival of another poem is maybe a really damn good way to live a life. And exciting and not boring and perhaps also relieving of some of the pressures that come with just living a life on this earth that's not perfect and is broken in so many ways. Um,
Exactly.
wow, I love all those thoughts. I feel so inspired now to think less and to just I don't know if anticipate is the right word, but just to live in a way that's like more anticipatory. Um, I like that word. That sounded nice to say. But it's
Yeah.
just like maybe even yearning is the right word, or to live in a state of yearning for something, but not in a way that like feels desperate, but more of like, when you're waiting for like someone you really like to pick you up for a date, or you're going to go pick up someone for a date and it's going to be really, really fun, but it's like this yearning for it throughout the entire week in a good way, but not in a desperate way, just in a like, I know it's coming and it's going to come in a matter of time and I'm not sure when. And
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And I would even add that as poets, especially when we are like starting to delve into the poetry attempt, the poetic attempt, um, we should let we should let it fill up, right? I really like this quote by Open that says, "Because I'm not silent, the poems are bad."
mm,
Right? He is trying to be. He tries to challenge this notion that we can truly achieve what the appetite uh, demands of us. Ben Lerner calls it the Peter logic of poetry
mm,
because he argues that it always fails. Every poem fails to represent the thing that motivates it, right? The feeling,
mhm,
the impression, the world. And that shouldn't sadden us, right? It's not a sad truth. Um, it is. It only means that life is bigger than language, right? The word isn't the world,
Yeah.
and there's poetry in being silent as well. There's poetry in just living without
Mhm.
taking notes, right? There's poetry that there's some poems that I don't know we shouldn't write, right?
Mhm.
Or share. We have a right to that, right?
Mhm.
We have the right to just stay quiet for a while. And
Mhm.
in my case, I found that that very quiet provokes the best poems that I've written. I just let it sit, you know. I just let it breathe sometimes. Because I know myself. I know I can be demanding. You know, I can plead one more every single day. Yeah, I think we do that. But at times we should let it rest and live and hug, right?
Mhm.
And love in a matter that there's a poem by Ada Limon. She's great at this. Um, I think the name's Touch Me or something like that. And she goes on just naming things that are usually subject to poetry, and she ends up with just touch me.
Mhm.
Stop, stop making poetry and just touch me. And
Yeah.
that's just a good reminder, right?
Yeah,
It
it's
is
so
a
good.
good reminder.
Before you said there are some things we shouldn't try to know. Maybe there are some poems we shouldn't try to write.
Exactly.
Hmm. Well,
Hmm.
I just want to just say thank you so much. I want to re-listen to this over and over because I feel like there were so many good little moments of hope and also good moments of just us trying. We're just trying to talk about poetry, and I love that today was a poetic attempt at trying to just chat about that. And
Hmm.
I want to just thank you so much for being a part of our wonderful poetry community and also for taking the time today to just enjoy each other's company and sit with all of these things and talk about them. I think it's not only fun, but it's also perhaps necessary to ponder and to wander into different types of conversations and see what happens. Before I mention that if anyone's listening that would like some poetry community to reach out to either me or you, if someone wants to find your work or connect with you online, is the best way on your socials or an email, or how can we reach you, Carlos?
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. It was really special this morning. Um, sure, yeah. Please do write. I promise I will answer. You can find me in my social media in Instagram by Flor de Yermo. That's um, in Spanish, but it means desert flower. So please do look for me. I will be alert, right?
Mm,
I will be open to our conversation. Thank you, Maria. This was magical. I will rewatch this and probably rewatch it again after that.
Me too. I'll make sure to put your handle up on the screen so that everyone can see the spelling, just so that you don't,
Thank you.
just so that you can't miss Carlos. Yes, up there, up there. Um, Truly, again, I want to thank you for sharing this idea of perhaps not knowing and holding uncertainty. I think this is one that I'm going to just like I said, it stuck with me since we met in Mexico City, and I'm still thinking about it, and I'm going to keep thinking about it. And if any listeners if any of the people that are listening have some thoughts on that or want to just share and also say, me too, that's how I feel, please reach out or comment on the video. We'll make sure to read the comments and respond. Um, you're just a beautiful gem of a human, Carlos, and from the bottom of my heart, thanks so much for being here.
I think we're. Thank you, Maria. Please take care of yourself. See you soon.